Well, welcome. We're very excited to talk to you this evening. First question, I don't mean to talk about your age, but you are 40 next year.
Thank you for that.
Impending midlife crisis.
Absolutely.
Do you think you'll get a fast car?
Yes, I do. I hope I do. Well, what I've learnt is the car doesn't know how old I am, so that's a nice thing. And definitely don't let age limit me, that's for sure. My teammate, actually, funny enough, Alex Zanardi, you saw that he was stood there. He lost both his limbs in a massive race car incident in an IndyCar about 6 years ago. I've been teammates with him for the last 5 years. And funny enough, he decided he wanted to be a Paralympic, and he won 2 gold medals at the Olympics this year. He's 46 years old, so he hasn't let age limit him either. And I think it's just a question of mind over matter, you know. That's what it's all about.
They've picked the wrong person to question you, really, because I'm frightened by speed. Ply my on a push bike is plenty scary for me. Do you love speed?
At first, I think I just loved motor racing in terms of, it was just anything with a throttle and a brake really interested me. Yes, I enjoyed the speed, but you soon get used to that. It's something you do. And the challenge for me is actually probably overcoming my limiting beliefs in the car, overcoming, defeats, bringing the team together, achieving something that you didn't think was possible. That's what I thrive on more than just the speed. Yes, I love, doing a fast lap on a great track, but just sort of dealing with, the pure instinct that's required to achieve something very special, and being able to sort of do that time and time again and rely on it is something that I really enjoy.
Kathy and Tim both talked about mental preparation. Let's start with physical preparation, because I was fascinated by what you were saying earlier about the level of physical prep you have to do to get ready for this competition.
Well, that's right. I mean, obviously Tim knows as well from training guys at Le Mans, but one of the biggest things is concentration in a race car and remaining, to have pure intent for maybe an hour and a half, if that's your race, or for your stint might be 2-3 hours at Le Mans. And of course, concentration under pressure, concentration whilst sat in a cockpit that reaches levels of heat around a sauna sort of temperature, full race overalls. On top of that, a lot of steering activity. And what people don't realise is you brake with about 90 bar of brake pressure for every hit of the brake. So you don't brake like you do on your road car. You hit the brake as hard as you can to maximise that first initial hit. That's when the car's generating the most downforce. So your leg strength needs to be good. And of course, anything in sport under pressure can also raise your heart rate as well, elevate your intensity. So yeah, you've got to be fit for sure. It's a lot like in a lot of ways shooting as well. Although you have to be fit and you have to be strong, you also have to have great mental preparation, because the last little bit of performance comes from the right attitude, and that's something I've learned a lot about.
But I mean, you were talking earlier about your heart rate, what it gets up to during a race, and for most people, if you just thought, well, he sits in a car, he drives around, what do you get up to in a...
Well, at times when you're under pressure from a competitor, we've actually seen in Formula 1 guys' heart rate reaching about 190. Mine also goes up quite a lot. I generally am around the 150, 160 mark during the race, but when I need to, for instance, I might have to push really hard on an in-lap before the pit stop, or out of the pits after an initial pit stop, and really have that level of intensity. Or I'm being challenged by a competitor maybe for lap after lap, and you can't make one single mistake. It can reach up to 180, 190. Yeah.
And you're doing this for how long? Let's just be clear about the
well, in
time of the
DTM
races.
it's an hour and a half. The race is about an hour and a half,
right.
So a fair bit of time. You just need to have a good level of fitness, good body condition, good mental intensity, and that comes with physical training. There's definitely a close link between being physically fit and mentally fit, and obviously, the mental side. Keep coming back to that, but in motor racing, it is all about that last little bit of mental intensity, which enables you to perform at a high level.
Well, let's move away from the physical to the mental now, because we were talking earlier about the kind of preparation. Let's leave mindfulness in the car for the moment, but building up to preparation. We've heard from Kathy and Tim. Let us know a little bit about how you mentally prepare for these big events.
Well, yeah, it's really interesting listening to those two guys, and sometimes it's nice to, guys and girls, sorry, Kathy, but it's really nice to get reminded, but I definitely believe that preparing for a race, you should be preparing like you're going into a fight, into a boxing ring. A boxer won't train at the highest intensity, he'll build himself up. So I tend to have a very set format of the way I work, and my race prep starts about a week to 10 days before the event. First thing I will do is leave Guernsey a week before the event, because I need to get away from, it's not, not nice to say this, but I need to get away from the chaos of family life. Yeah. So I sort of try to become a motor racing Buddha for a couple of days, where I just go to my UK property and just literally stay on my own and work through my race footage from last year, or some testing and data, work through on the race preparation. Also do a lot of meditation in that time to start trying to sort of visualize a little bit more at a deeper level of mind. So making my end result more emotional. I also go and see a guy in Bath who gives me a sort of meditation CD and audio, works through my limiting problems from the last race so that I don't carry those problems into the next race. And then I arrive, what I like to do is do all my thinking before Thursday, so that when I arrive at the circuit for Friday practice, I'm relying then on natural ability and instinct, and I'm not thinking too much at that moment about, the conscious side of the job.
I'm fascinated by that meditation idea, but just going back to something else you said, we often hear about sports people who, because of their routine, they get quite superstitious. Do you have any room for superstition? I mean, you're quite clear that you want to do the same thing. We've heard about that from Tim, doing the same routines. But does it get superstitious at all? Do you then start worrying that you haven't done something the same?
Unfortunately, superstition is a sign of weakness, and I've tried to eliminate all of those. I used to
So all the sportsmen we hear about, their lucky socks or lucky pants or whatever?
Yeah, well, you've got to be careful with all of that, It's a little bit dangerous to, because the monkey mind, I call that sort of inner voice, my monkey, basically, and he's always trying to sort of destabilize you. So, the monkey's always there trying to chatter with me and say, well, hang on, you didn't get in from the left-hand side of the car, you might have an accident this time, or, he's always trying to knock me back, basically, my inner voice, the monkey. So I don't try and allow myself to have any of those superstitions, and if I do get myself into that routine, I know it's the inner voice trying to off-put me, so I just sort of knock it off and carry on. But it's definitely something you should try and eliminate, I think, from your preparation. I mean, what you should really be trying to achieve is, all of your work is done up front. Obviously Tim is ultra professional at this, and something we can really benefit from here in Guernsey. But I've had to learn a lot of this myself, and one of my big issues was that with the added pressure of achieving, when you become a paid professional driver, you have that, or a paid professional sportsman, you have that added pressure where you're feeding your family, or whether you've just got big expectation on you. And it's very easy at that point to become, you have to put a lot of pressure on yourself and to become quite conscious with the movements or in the car, thinking of what you're doing, judging yourself all of the time. And what you have to do with your preparation is do your preparation beforehand, and then at that moment in time, be at your most natural and most instinctive state. And it does require a lot of preparation, a lot of work, and that's why I'm really keen to be doing this seminar on Sunday, the mindfulness. And this is something I practice all the time, because I think mindfulness and concentration are closely linked. I mean, I do practice my mindfulness when I'm out walking on the cliffs or whatever. I try to stop myself from thinking, and I mean, I struggle sometimes to walk from there to there without having a thought. Now what happens, it's okay when you're in everyday life, like now, that thought doesn't really matter because we're here and now and we're doing whatever. But at that crucial moment in your career when the result counts, it might be you're on the starting grid, or you're lined up for the London Marathon or whatever, then those thoughts become very powerful. They creep up on you. So I sort of practice this mindfulness so that when I actually am in that moment in the car, I'm relying on pure intent and instinct and natural intuition and nothing else. But that needs to be trained. So it's something you can't.
That's fascinating. Can I push a little bit further about that aspect of the preparation? I've got another question about the technical side, but you started karting when you were 8. You weren't practicing meditation before karting. When in your career did you start thinking, actually, this is something very important? You said you had to learn it yourself. You must have had inklings from other people. I mean, tell us how you got into that level of preparation.
What's nice when you're a kid is that naturally you are very intuitive. Children are very intuitive, and that's why it's great to get young kids in sport nice and early. I think even looking at what I've read and some of the studies that I've looked at, their brain frequency's lower. They're more alpha state, and they're more sort of instinctive. I mean, I remember first driving a go-kart, and nobody told me about understeer and oversteer and how to save the cart or collect the cart in a moment. You did it naturally. Yeah. The time when you really need to focus on yourself is when you gradually get older, you start to become more analytical, the pressure starts to increase, you're starting to you want to do something bigger with your life, and you make the transition from club sport to professional sport, where you are going to compete against people better than you to begin with. It might not be that they're more talented than you, it may be that they're more experienced than you, but at that moment in time you're very susceptible to judging yourself, or to hitting the self-destruct button, and that's the time when you need to learn about controlling your thoughts. I learned about meditation at that point. I was at Silverstone, I'd given up everything. We left Guernsey, I was living in a caravan, and I had a dream to become a motor racing champion. Well, there were so many things every day knocking me back. Things weren't happening. I was failing. I was driving the car. wasn't winning. And the only thing that I had at that moment in time was the inner belief that something would happen. Now that belief gets tested, and you have to reinforce it all of the time. And you can't kid yourself, but you have to build up gradual confidence and belief, and it's something that just you don't get overnight.
Were you doing all this by yourself? Did you not have coaches who are...
I learnt a lot of this on my own, because I've got to admit, when you're desperate, you'll do anything. And I do believe at times everybody has to go through that, and everybody does go through that in sport, because there are times when, a lot of the times you don't achieve your goal, and that's as a sports person, that's a very hard thing to deal with, because it's you that has to take the helmet off, or it's you that has to walk through the crowd, it's you that has to answer 50 or 100 questions as to why you didn't achieve your goal. And so, that's when I looked at ways to control my thought process, to assist me, to give me a solid anchor that doesn't allow these things to knock me off centre. And that's where I learned about meditation and the Silver Mind method, and very much end result thinking. That worked at a certain period of time where I was just visualising the end result and achieving my success. But sooner or later, you don't achieve your success, and you have to sort of always adjust the way you work. And that's why I'm into this mindfulness, because it makes you concentrate on the now, the process. And I think you come back to what we're talking about tonight, simplifying everything. I just try to be the best I can be at every opportunity. That's all I try to do.
That's right. We'll come back to mindfulness in the races in a moment. But going back to another aspect of your preparation, you're talking about the technical side, watching previous performances. Give us an insight into how technical you have to be with regard to courses, cars, routes, and your prior performances. What kind of stuff are you looking at?
Well, we can't do anything in the car without the team knowing about it. So all the engineers, we have 200 people at BMW Motorsport who are at the track, analysing everything we do. From brake pressure, steering angles, the amount of curbs we took, the amount of speed we carry into the corner, the G-force, the steering angle, the amount we turn in. Everything's analysed, everything's judged. So first of all, you have to learn to sort of deal with those judgments in a positive way. That's something that that's the feedback I get from the car. I also work a lot on my own personal improvement. So I think in shooting they use the vision goggles, but I go to a simulator before every race, and one of the things I do is put the vision goggles on, measures where I'm looking in the corner and when. I found out with a lot of young sports people, we've trained quite a few young superstars going through Silverstone at the race school I have there, and they don't look far enough ahead. Now these are really top level karters who have achieved a lot. They've gone into single seaters and their career's stalled. It can be something very simple, like they're not looking far enough ahead. You get into a race car and it goes a lot faster, and you don't compensate for that. You're not looking far enough ahead. The mind's obviously like a computer, and you've got to feed it with as much information as possible. So the vision is something that I work on myself, and I'm constantly making sure that my vision's good, that I'm looking into the corner early, that I'm extending my vision on. It's a bit like playing squash, watching the ball. Make sure you're always keeping your eye on the ball. It's very similar to motor racing. I work on myself a lot, my mind state. Obviously, something that the small things become very big at that key moment. So I prepare myself for for the difficulties and make sure that I react in a certain way.
Okay. We're talking about this level of training, of vision and responses and things like that. And some of the kids at school asked me to ask you this. Do computer games, can they help in training people's kind of responses?
Well, I'm the generation that doesn't use, I mean, I use the simulator now, but I've been brought up with pure feel. So I've driven with the seat of my arse for 20 years, basically. So I can feel the movement and the rotation of the car and everything. I use a simulator, but you have to go very much from visual to feeling. And the youngsters coming through can naturally make that transition. I struggle a little bit with just the visual side. I like to feel the car. Now we have, thanks to Cranfield University, we have a simulator that gives me a bit more feeling. So it blows airbags into my bum and into my back, into my shoulders. So when I make the turn, I can feel the movement in the car. But yeah, I mean, you can learn. What I use the games, the simulator, and I have one at home, just purely for mental rehearsal.
Is this like to learn?
Yeah, what I tend to do to stop myself from overcomplicating, for instance, a certain corner where I've had, analysis from my team that I need to brake 3 meters later, I need to turn slightly earlier, I need to take a little bit more inside curb, increase my mid-corner speed by 2 k's and get on the throttle slightly earlier. Now that type of judgment happens all of the time, and I've got to convert that into a feeling. So what I do now is I just put a one-word phrase for that corner. It might be more commitment, or let's say exit vision, or I just give myself a one-word phrase for each corner that brings me back to more natural instinctive driving. One thing I do as well, which is really nice, is I remind myself on each straight that I'm going to be my best, that every lap counts. Things like this. And it's just strategies which I'm giving to these young drivers, which are really helping them sort of give them a guidance and give them a focus and stop them from overcomplicating things and not driving instinctively. I mean, Senna was one of the first guys to talk about having this out-of-body experience in the car. He was in Monaco and he almost came out of the car. And, that's obviously what the, that is just in the zone. You're just witnessing yourself almost.
Well, that leads me on to what I was going to ask next about if we get into the races now and move from that preparation into the race. I'm talking to youngsters who are learning how to drive. I see pretty soon you'll do that thing where you drive to school and you don't even know you've driven. Does that ever happen to you in a race? You think, where did the last 5 laps go?
Yeah, that's no, definitely not. There's too much going on, that's for sure. People ask me, do you ever have music in your ears or anything? People think in the zone means that, but it's so not, is it? So do you want to tell us a little bit about what you understand by mindfulness actually in the race and explain to us about Ayrton Senna, this idea of kind of being outside yourself? If you just need total pure, I can only describe it as total and pure concentration. And at that moment in time, everything, your senses, your smell, the noise, your sight, is just crystal clear. You smell everything, you witness everything, you sense everything.
But never for one moment do you go, wow, this is cool, I'm really sensing everything.
No, because then you're out of the zone. Yeah, we had that discussion just before. It's a very difficult state. It's a challenging state.
It's quite hard to talk about. When you talk about it, you think, I'm not quite putting it into words.
The harder you try, the more you push it away. The only way that I can get into that state is at the point where you're almost desperate for performance, and you're so desperate and you're so focused that it happens. It just happens. Some of my best races were, you've got 4 laps and the championship matters. You have to reel that driver in and pass them, otherwise you're not champion. And at that moment, you have no room for thinking. That's the zone.
But if you want something so much, my experience is so limited, but when you want something so much in rowing, that's when you tense up. Surely you can't get this sense of being in the zone by really wanting it.
It's not tension. You have to be almost comfortable in the uncomfortable.
Right.
It's a very challenging thing. In the race car, if you tense, you lose the feel. So muscle tension doesn't help you. But it's almost, I can't describe it, it's an energy that just makes you act, it's fight or flight.
Right.
You can't, it's really difficult to explain, but it's a really fantastic feeling because you are absolutely witnessing something that takes you to a level beyond what you thought was possible. And, obviously that's a great experience. And if I could do it every day, I probably would be a lot more successful. And
right. Well, I'll ask this question now. It was going to be a bit later, but you said you really enjoy it. I did start off by saying you're 40 and, you know, midlife crisis.
39. I'm still in my 30s, yeah.
But when you stop, how do you think you personally are going to cope with stepping away from motor racing?
I think for me, you know, I've still got 2 or 3 years where I need to focus purely on that process, and you know, I hope I can achieve. I know that maybe the longest part of my career is behind me, but I hope the best part of my career is ahead of me. That's the way I'm thinking. My exit strategy will be. I very much enjoy working with the young drivers. I have a lot to offer there, and I'm sure that when I channel my you know, my mental determination into something else, maybe in business, that I hope I can achieve some success. But it will be very difficult. And
it's fascinating to hear you talk about this mental state you're in and how kind of almost intoxicating it is.
I find it very difficult at the moment being home. I mean, I'm at my worst when I'm, you know, this week I've not got a lot going on, and I need to have that real concentration all the time to achieve more. And you know, when I'm racing during the season, it's great because every race I have this big build-up and this massive focus, and you know, that's something that's very hard for anybody in sport to find when they leave the sport.
So maybe not now, but a few years ago, I mean, everyone who's done any sport knows this, that all of a sudden you find yourself thinking about a glass of beer or an evening meal or something else. In a race of 1.5 hours, do any of those thoughts ever pop into your head at this level now?
No, because you're under so much pressure. You know, you have a team.
There's no time to run.
You have the team in your ear pushing you for a certain target or lap time. You've got to make decisions on strategy. You know, you have to know when to pit. You have to judge what the car in front's doing. Is he using his tyres too much at the beginning? Can you creep up on him? Is there something he's making a mistake? You just got no time. You just, you know, I'm sure if you asked, you know, these guys here. I mean, Lee, he's just, you know, been in the Olympics here and run the marathon. I mean, I'm sure all he was thinking about was his heart rate. You know, when he needs to start pushing. Was that split, you know, good? And you're just so full of everything. You know, you don't have time for any distractions.
Don't want him to stand up my moment saying, "Oh, I passed him at McDonald's and I thought I'd love him." And,
yeah.
Look, let's go back to teamwork, because Tim earlier talked about getting a group together where the banter was good, everyone was supportive, but everyone was working really hard. Now, how many drivers have BMW got in your current setup at the moment?
6 drivers.
Right.
And they're all
competition there.
Oh yeah, massively, yeah.
So how does the team organise competition? How do you personally deal with competition when you're in the same team?
Well, motor racing is a team sport, and you know, competition can be quite self-destructive, but at the same time, it can also lift the whole team. So, you know, personally, I look at my teammate. I hope he does well. I hope I do better.
Right.
And I try to use, I mean, any form of negative energy is going to drain me. So any thought that I'm thinking about him maybe being better than me, or crikey, he's achieved more than me in that session, you know, is destructive. So, you know, you kind of try to, I like the sort of martial arts where they use their opponent's energy to make them stronger. And I try to use that to motivate me. And if I get beaten, which, you know, you do a lot in top level sport, you have to be able to deal with that. And as long as you've got the mental strategies in place, you can deal with it. Or you almost become, you ignore it in a certain way, and you're just so focused on what you need to do, being your best, being the best you can be, right, that it takes away any sort of focus of what your teammate's doing. Very often that works, believe me.
We were talking earlier about injury. What advice would you give to a young sportsman who's been working very hard, has got injured, and they're having to overcome or deal with the frustration of not being able to get on? Is it slightly different? Have you had injuries that have hampered you?
Yep, I've definitely had times, you know, during my career where I've had issues. Recently, the thyroid tumour and stuff like that, and for sure, yeah, it can distract you. And I know what it's like to be sat on the sub bench, you know, watching teammates compete. Maybe somebody's replaced you for a couple of races because you've had an injury, and it's very important to not get drawn into that thought process. And of course, that's when mental conditioning is going to need to be used at its, you know, most rigorous, basically. And I think, you know, in terms of how you prepare for that, there's great people here in Guernsey now. We've got Tim here, and you know, if any of our young athletes in Guernsey get injured, I'm sure rehabilitation here that we have in place in Guernsey should be much better now, and should be, you know, able to give them a focus and repair them quickly. And one of the most important things is to have instant expert advice immediately. That's one thing I've really felt quite hard in, you know, in Guernsey. It might be a Saturday night, you're leaving to go to a competition and you have a problem and you need to sort it, you know. And we're lucky now with BMW, we have doctors and we're able to, you know, they're at the event, so if you have a problem, food poisoning, whatever, they're there to sort it out. And I hope we can get something in place for our young up-and-coming stars here that have that instant access to medical advice and give them the route that they need. And, you know, with any injury, to deal with it quickly, that's the most important thing.
Okay, with regard to that aspect, you're doing a sport travelling incredibly quickly. You were talking earlier about, you know, someone who, there was a recent fatality. How do you personally cope with that? Obviously, we've got all this mindfulness, all this preparation in terms of meditative work going on.
Yeah.
But how do you cope with the reality that you're doing something that can kill you?
Well, I've learned in my career that when I'm not committed to the risk, I'm at my most dangerous. So I don't allow it to enter into my...
How have you learned that? I mean, what's the...
Well, if you're slightly, let's say, nervous, I'm most likely to crash. That's when I'm most likely to put a wheel on the grass when I turn in. You obviously, you know, when you're racing, you're using every inch of the road, and you have to use all of the road on the entry, everything on the apex, and all of the road on the exit. And you can make a mistake, and if you're nervous of that, you know, you will make the mistake.
It's part of that full commitment, and
you just have to work on strategies. I mean, when I get into my car, I imagine I'm getting into my coat of armour. And you just have to build strategies. And, you know, everything's dangerous. I know that I'm in a very safe car. I feel more exposed on the roads, you know, driving down the M25 in the rain when some guy who you know probably hasn't got a lot of ability passes you 110 mile an hour, you know, in the fast lane. It's like everything. You just have to be able to put it out. And the only way you can put it out of your mind is to focus on something else that's positive.
Okay.
And that's
well,
the key.
Personal question, you have a son who's interested in karting. How do you feel about him getting into motorsport?
I'm a bit worried about that, to be honest, because I know the chances of success are so slim. But I really just want him to enjoy it and just learn about the life experience. I think the sport gives you such an amazing life experience. It teaches you to deal with success, to deal with defeat. It teaches you to be your own worst critic in a positive way. It teaches you how to achieve something that you didn't think was possible. And I just hope that he can enjoy it, because I think that's the most important thing for any young sports person. And at a certain point in your career, you lose the enjoyment because the pressure's so big, and then your performance will drop, your energy drops and everything else. And it's just to keep the enjoyment at the highest level, to enjoy driving. And if he comes home with a smile on his face, I'm happy. If he wants to achieve more, I'm happy. But for me, as long as he can be the best he can be, that's enough for me.
So you've had a great career, you've already enjoyed driving. There must have been times where you were very close to quitting or giving it up and doing something else.
Yeah, I think every sportsman always struggles with that at a certain point, because you know, the highs are high, but the lows are so low that it can be quite tough, And obviously, for me, being away from the family so much, missing my daughter's birth, being stuck in Hong Kong when my daughter was born premature, definitely things like that question what you're doing.
Sure.
But at the same time, I've got a fantastic life. I've got a great, you know, home. I live in Guernsey where I want to live, and my family are happy. So you know, it's also brought something very positive. So I hope I can give that experience to other people.
Okay, going back in time, at the age of 8, you started karting. If we could redo your life and said, all right, but we'll give you the same success in another sport, what would it have been?
I think for me, I would probably have to say that cycling is something I really enjoy. And obviously I'm a bit devastated most recently about the Lance Armstrong stuff. But you know, it's a sport that is really tough, and I enjoy it, you know, a lot. So probably, but you know what I found with all the people I've met in sport, we're all the same, you know, all think the same, whether it's a runner, a cyclist, a, you know, football player, a racing driver, we all think the same. And I think, you know, I was just fortunate to end up a racing driver. That's what I love to do, but I would enjoy any form of sport, I still do, because it's the mental challenge that really stimulates me, and I enjoy that so much. You can get that in any sport. and it makes the difference.
Well, thanks very much.
Definitely
One final
makes-
question that I promised a student I'd ask this. If they phoned you up and said, will you be the new Stig for Top Gear, would you do it?
At the moment, I wouldn't do it because that means I probably haven't got a racing job, and you need a time to be the Stig. In fact, I wasn't the Stig. Everyone thought I was, but I wasn't. But I was asked to do it. Yeah, but I was just too busy with my racing, and in fact, the Stig is not a good job to have because that means you haven't got a job, and as a racing driver, so it means you're not fast enough.
It's not a good job. You've got to work with Jeremy Clarkson. I would say that's it.
Yeah, he's hard work, that's for sure. But thanks very much for inviting me this
Guys,
evening.
it's been absolutely fascinating. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's absolutely great that everybody here is doing so much for young sport. We've got Jeremy here, and we've got some great people now on board that is going to really help this island go to the next level. We've got some fantastic sports people here, and getting them from this level to the next level, that's where our focus needs to be, and I'm sure we can do that.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, Andy Priaulx. Thanks.